I am CFN team. Thank you. I see you. Oh, we have another. No, I've gone way past that. I'm actually sharing, I'm recording, I have my participant window open, everything's up. They are not able to hear me as a host, but my little icon showing me as the panelist, it shows I'm talking. How would I hear my voice? I can tell that the computer is registering what I'm saying. There's no echo, and I could hear the panelist a minute ago. I can't hear my own voice. I don't know what you mean. And people are now starting to join. Have you been able to join yet? So you're not able to help. I don't think I can right now. And I'm sharing my screen. But I'm sharing my screen already. People are joining. I'm there. No. I really don't want to stop sharing.
Do you need me to do anything different, Ann?
I don't know what to tell you. I have the meeting. I did. It sees me talking. It actually sees me talking. The little TV, the little computer thing sees me talking. Yes. But they can't hear me. Correct.
How we doing, Ann?
Apparently not well. Otherwise she'd say, okay. Yeah, I think you're.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Hi guys, can you hear me? Hi Laura, this is Ann. Can you hear me? Oh my gosh.
Can you hear me, Ann? No, I just unmuted. Yes, perfect.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Okay.
Well, we can't do any questions and stuff, so.
Oh, no. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the CFN webinar. We just are waiting for a few more people to log on, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Great. Good morning, everybody. This is Jeff Miller from Customers First Now. Thanks for joining the webinar. We'll get started. Today we're really talking about the topic of engaging leadership in the customer experience program. We have a lot of customers and contacts that really find it difficult to kind of begin to build momentum in their programs and really begin to set forward a cultural approach into customer experience. And that really is why we've tried to pull this topic together today. We have with us today, Megan Dobson was to be coming with us, but unfortunately she has bronchitis and is not able to make the call. Laura Nigbar is with us though, and Laura has been through all aspects of this program, and she's really going to help bring to life the components of the program that we work through with Northwestern Mutual. I'm with the Customer First Now team, do a lot of work with clients as well as lots of sort of strategy work, helping companies move forward with culture, but also more tactical approaches into redesign, analysis and measurements and so on. So we're looking forward to a great conversation today. And thanks again for joining. We're going to go through just a quick introduction into what the program is like that we're talking through. And I'll lead that off with just some of these tools of engagements that you'll see on the screen. But then it's going to get exciting because Laura's really going to talk about what this has been like in the real world for Northwestern Mutual. And then we have some time at the end that we'll save for questions. So on your panel, you'll see a question and answer area. If you have a question at any point during the webinar, please just go into that area and enter your question and send it over to us, and then at the end of this, we'll begin to talk through some of those questions. And we will be done this webinar just before the next hour comes up. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I just want to say thanks to Laura for joining us on the call. CFN has had a great relationship with Northwestern Mutual for close to 2 years now. We've seen a lot of the efforts that they put in place around customer experience, as well as developing advisor experiences or B2B type of relationships. So they have really spent time looking at end client relationships, as they're called in their world, as well as business partner relationships with advisors and others within the organization. And it's always interesting for us. We have the luxury of talking to so many different companies around the customer experience work. And we really can tell when a company is truly committed to customer experience, actually looking at how to evolve an experience versus those that are just trying sort of one-off initiatives because they really approach it differently. When this is done well, customer experience work is about a cultural shift. And those of you that have been working in this area for a while will understand this shift is not easy and it's not a quick fix. It requires strong, methodical, and deliberate approach. And it's not easy work, and I know that you'll find sort of the work and the conversation that Laura is going to bring to life for us in this quite exciting. CFN is a 5-step approach that we use to help companies around CX capabilities, whether you're brand new to customer experience, whether you're trying to evolve the customer experience work you're doing, or trying to move yourself into best in class. We have the ability to help all types of organizations through this. The reality, though, is no company has the luxury of following a methodology or a plan, step 1, step 2, step 3 type of order. Companies always have real day-to-day work that's going to get in the way of what they're doing. But at the end of the day, regardless of how you choose to go about developing your customer experience capabilities, if your work is not all connected and you're not working towards the same thing, you will end up with an inconsistent customer experience at the end of the day, and it will not be delivering the business outcomes that you're expecting to see in place. So what we want to talk about are, in today's conversation, as you'll see on the screen, there are sort of 5 fundamental things that organizations that do this most effectively have in place in order to sort of set the agenda and the motion forward of the culture shift. I'm just going to overview them, and then Laura's really going to get into the details of this. So the first area is really about making sure that as a company, you're really clear on why customer experience matters to you as a company, and you have to be very realistic about where you stand as a company now. So what that means is you're trying to drive business outcomes as a result of your customer experience. You're trying to either get more customers, have customers stay longer, buy more from you, or have less cost associated with serving those customer base. And you should be clear on the financial outcomes that you're trying to create within your business in order to create the engagement from the company. Because at the end of the day, everybody knows if it's not financial value to the company, then it's not going to be something that people are going to align behind and engage behind. And as we said, this is a long-term proposition, so you need to be honest about where you stand today as an organization so that you really do understand what your capability changes need to be in order to really drive this business forward. The other thing to keep in mind is don't equate customer experience as meaning cost. There are investments that you'll need to put in place to begin the foundational work that you have. But when customer experience is working, it's a result of everyone in the business behaving differently as a result of your customer experience work. But it's the same people that are on the calls today. It's the same people that are facing off with your customers today. It's the same people developing your technologies today that you're trying to influence. This is not about creating a massive external infrastructure around customer experience, because at the end of the day, that does not drive accountability and success within an organization. The second piece of this is really making sure that you're explicitly clear on what your current state experience is today. And that really most effectively is done through things such as journey mapping. It's making sure that you get everyone on the same page as to what that current state experience is. Consider your sort of point of departure. Where are we starting from? Pretty difficult to move to a future state if you don't know what your current state is. That includes explicit clarity around what are those touch points or interactions taking place between you and your customers today, whether that's B2B, B2C, internal employee journeys, whatever journey that you're trying to depict. You need to understand what those interactions are, and you need to understand what the impact of those interactions are having on your relationships. In other words, you need to be able to measure them, and you need to be able to measure them from the customer's point of view. So this is a foundational step in helping you build out and establish priorities. As you better understand your current state, you need to begin to shift the mindset. The mindset is really about moving towards an intended customer experience. Customer experiences do not happen by accident, or at least good customer experiences don't. They are meticulously planned and articulated so that everyone in the organization understands how they participate in delivering that experience. And so you need to educate, you need to align, and you need to activate that intended experience. And I think that this is an area that is going to be really interesting to learn more about from Laura's conversation today. And also you need an effective governance approach in place. You need to know that you're addressing this from the senior leadership on down. You can start customer experience in the middle of an organization, but it's an incredibly difficult task. Those companies that do this most successfully do so because their executive leadership are all on board, they're aligned, they understand the importance, they understand the current experience, and they've agreed to what that intended experience is, and they're willing to prioritize the effort and put the energy behind this to make this work. Then it's about getting the organization engaged, getting people educated, aligning them, getting them excited about delivering the experience, and really understanding how they play a role in that experience. And then it's always coming back as an organization and measuring back to your map, measuring back to your experience to ensure that your outcomes are really driving the financial benefit to the company that you're hoping to. So keep in mind, customer experience is a means to an end. It is a way to drive business performance to whatever degree you wish. And so therefore you always have to understand what work you're doing and what the actual outcomes of that work are. It's no different than a system investment or anything else you do. You're looking for return on investment out of your customer experience work. So from there, I'm going to pass it over to Laura, and this is where this is going to get exciting because she's really going to bring this sort of theoretical conversation into the real world around how Northwestern has been taking this challenge on. So Laura, over to you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So a little bit about Northwestern Mutual before we dig into some of the depth of the things that Jeff just shared. So Northwestern Mutual is a financial service company. We're headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are a mutual company with an exclusive distribution force, which you will hear me reference as our field or our financial representatives. We have approximately 76 network offices across the United States and approximately 7,000 financial representatives. We have a strong foundation and a rich 160-year history. We are a mutual, value-led organization, and among our values has always been one very pervasive, unifying and defining value, which is the value of doing what's right for our policy owners and our clients. We also have the values of having an exceptional distribution system, which we are really proud of. We have world-class products and stellar financial ratings. While our strategy has always evolved, over years, it's always been core that we have the best interests of our policy owners and clients. So that's always been with us. However, how we're doing that has been evolving over the years. Since its inception, NM was exclusively focused on life insurance and continues to be known for having superior product value and the best distribution system, as I mentioned before. But in the last decade, we began transitioning from life insurance to a financial security company, integrating both the insurance and investment aspects. Initially, this was driven by some micro interactions with our field based on what they were seeing from clients and what the clients were saying they wanted and needed to our field force. But now we made a much more deliberate decision to move into an integrated value proposition to more fully align to those wants and needs across the company. Our strategy has been about helping people adopt a holistic approach to financial security, so both that protect and grow that I mentioned. Instead of just focusing on insurance and investment alone, we are beginning to bring them together into one whole picture to help people live life differently. It's about doing what's right for our clients, and we believe clients need both insurance and investment to achieve financial security and live life differently. So let's talk a little bit about why did CX matter for us at Northwestern Mutual and why this is something that we've been really focusing on and embarking on this process now for the last few years. So as many of you know, if you're on this call, over the past decade in almost every industry, the importance of the client experience has come into sharp focus. The recognition is that how a product or service is delivered is often as important as the product itself. And in industries with largely commoditized products, the customer experience may be the only source of competitive differentiation. So although NM has been operating from a position of strength and a strong foundation, we do have to start thinking differently. We have to enhance our relevance and our ability to deliver financial security in an increasingly digital world. The business world is becoming increasingly competitive, as all of you know, with both startups and incumbents looking for ways to better serve clients, all of ours, not just NMs. And client expectations are changing. Consumers today expect their interactions to be seamless. They value access, ease, and transparency. And for NM historically, we've looked at our field force as the client. So I mentioned our strong distribution system, and we really looked at them as the client. And we did think about our end user client, but it was more from that financial lens and them being a policy owner. So although the voice of the field is critical and one we have to continue to listen to, it's also important for us to hear directly from our end user clients and for them to let us understand really more deeply how we are with doing business with them. Are we hitting it out of the park, or are we missing the mark? So a distinctive experience is really something that we know is not a nice to have. It's essential in our success and if we're able to achieve our strategy or not. Next. So we know that we needed to change, but we had a lot to prepare for to get a solid foundation built. And Jeff talked about, making sure we had that preparation in place was critical. And so one of the first things that was essential was that executive support. And it was critical for our success and all that we've been able to achieve the last 2 years. How we started in 2014, one of our executives brought together a small cross-functional group of other executives and senior leaders to facilitate some strategic dialogue. And that dialogue focused on the type of client experience we were providing today and what was going to be needed for the future. That dialogue was essential in that several critical actions came out of those discussions, one of which was to assess our current organizational level of CX maturity. We interviewed from that a cross-section of leaders in our home office and in the field, and then had another set of cross-functional leaders complete Forrester's Customer Experience Maturity Assessment to understand better our level of maturity and identify areas of improvement. At the time we took Forrester's Maturity Assessment, it was based on 6 core capabilities and practices. And you'll see those on the screen. They're the strategy, client understanding, design, measurement, culture, and governance, all of which measure the practices around those particular areas and how we were doing against being a strong, solid organization and delivering that client experience. The CX Maturity Assessment results placed us in the early stages of maturity, showing us as either ad hoc or missing across all 6 core capabilities and practices. So those results definitely helped our executives see clearly that we had significant opportunity to enhance where we were providing and building greater loyalty and satisfaction. As a result, the assessment drove some of the following outcomes. First, CX was integrated into our company strategy refresh when we did that. We adopted the Net Promoter Score as a corporate driver metric. We received approval for investing and building out our Voice of Client program and resources. And that expansion of that original small group of leaders that were having that strategic dialogue actually transitioned into a more formal CX core team that started to guide the work forward, thus kind of starting that governance for us. Next. So the next way that we prepared for the program was advancing our work by obtaining leadership alignment agreement on the strategy and then the roadmap for the path forward. So we know that world-class companies who excel in client experience delivery are making sure that they design, implement, and manage that experience in a disciplined way. We also knew from our assessment results that we were not operating in a consistent and deliberate manner, so making the need for a clear roadmap that much more important for us. So as we approached this step on our efforts, we took a firm position that we would not be owned by one central team, but would be owned by the business where decisions and actions taken that directly connect to our clients. And Jeff mentioned that early, the importance of the client experience team not taking that ownership, but really making sure that it is integrated across the organization by our business areas. That foundational principle really made how we built our roadmap and the design stages even more important. Simply put, our job, we think at CX, has been to make it easy for every role in the organization to see the client's perspective so clearly that it compels them to act differently. That's that mindset shift and that culture shift that we've talked about is so critical. In order to build client experience ownership within every business unit, we needed a clear roadmap to guide that work forward. And so, as you can see from the roadmap here, that Jeff really helped us kind of with this framework, is these six areas. So the first is explore, which is focused on assessing the current state experience and setting those future aspirations. During this stage, we did a lot of things. We conducted robust research to better understand what matters most to our clients at a deeper level. We did that through focus groups, ethnographic research, exploratory research. We also aligned behind a CX strategy based on what we were learning from our clients and consumers. We defined the what and the how, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next few slides, which was built on creating what our distinctive experience we wanted to deliver was. We mapped the current state NM integrated client journey. We launched our Net Promoter Score, and we identified current state CX metrics and began to validate those metrics through relationship Net Promoter Score studies. And we completed our integrated client journey map, which we'll talk more about as well. We're now heavily focused on those next three areas, so the engage, embark, and embed, which is about engaging heads and hearts to the intended change, that culture and mindset that's so critical, and embarking on CX improvements, embedding and integrating those best practices across the organization. Work on those three stages has included continuing the CX metrics work, establishing a baseline for the NPS, and selecting and implementing a client feedback management platform, launching an online client community, and then integrating client experience practices and methodologies, which will provide continuous learning and improvement strategic efforts and work. I would describe where we're at today as being in the heavy lifting phase, so still very much in that preparing and foundational. If you think of an S-curve, we're really on that uphill end of that curve. We've got a strong foundation now through that exploring stage work that we did that we're going to build off, but we're making great progress, but we still have a lot of important work in front of us. So definitely a marathon, not a sprint, and what we're focused on strategically as a longer-term horizon. So we must balance our quick wins with the effort we know are much longer-term in nature and realizing that full impact to the overall experience. Next. All right. So Jeff mentioned early on the importance of shifting that mindset. I've talked about it a couple of times in the previous slides already, and the importance of being really deliberate on our outcomes and what we really want to achieve. So you've heard me reference a distinctive experience a few times, and I'll admit this is one of the biggest questions we've received initially from all of our employees. Like, what do we mean by distinctive? It's so elusive. We've got to really bring it down to actionable terms. And so CFN introduced us to the CX Statement of Intent framework, which has been an extremely valuable tool for us that we use to provide the necessary clarity and alignment for our leaders and the organization as a whole. Because we needed to start with the leaders, but if we didn't bring it down to every role across the organization, and yes, that can sound quite massive, we knew that we were going to miss the mark because every client or every employee has the potential for impacting a client. So we knew this was really critical and important for us. So just kind of an overview of the Statement of Intent framework. It has four key components. The first is the what, which is basically describing the overarching experience that we intend to deliver to our clients. The second component is the how. So the specific things we're going to focus on to deliver the intended experience at the touch point level. These are expressed for us, we call them our CX operating principles, which reflect our key brand promise and our differentiators. The third component is the client actions and business outcomes we want to see. So do we want them purchasing more, greater loyalty, increased advocacy, those types of things. And then you need to make sure that metrics were in place to track progress over time. And then the fourth component is what we listen for from clients through research. So our voice of client feedback, and this is to let us know whether or not we've actually succeeded in delivering that intended experience. And these are the responses that correlate with client loyalty and satisfaction. So those are the four key components of that statement of intent. So with these elements, we already had been working on a lot of them, but this framework was what we needed in order to tie them together. We use the statement of intent to more visibly connect the mission and the brand of our business to the capabilities needed to deliver the intended experience, which we refer to as that distinctive experience to all of our employees. This work was in development for a while, and really we needed that outside-in perspective using qualitative and quantitative research through those focus groups and deep ethnographic research. It was then taken to our cross-functional executive leadership team for input and buy-in. And that alignment of those leadership groups really represented a big step forward for laying the foundation for making client focus a priority. And one of the key learnings in this work was the importance of making the operating principles actionable, which took more time than we originally anticipated. So getting at the heart of the principles in an actionable format was a critical step in helping us move this work forward in a very tangible way. And you'll hear me talk a little bit more about how we did this in just a little bit. Jeff, do you have any additional thoughts?
Yeah, this is a really important foundational step. The reality is that all companies are delivering an experience, whether it's intentional or not. Particularly important here is connecting your experience with your mission, your vision, your values, and your brand. And so when we work with companies to do this, it's not that we're just creating this out of thin air. It really is connected to your brand, because your objective is that each and every interaction will be delivering an on-brand experience or an intentional experience. So keep in mind, all companies deliver an experience today. The question is whether it is an intentional experience or not, and if it is a consistent, connected, on-brand experience. And that really is the purpose of this exercise, is ensuring that your brand and your mission, vision, values are brought to life in every interaction. And employees really understand, sort of have that nugget in the back of their head that helps them understand how to behave when they don't have a process or procedure in place to address a customer need.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Next. All right. So one of the other things that Jeff really hit on when he first was introducing our webinar was the importance of understanding the current state experience. And we needed to do that from our client's perspective. I mentioned that we really looked to our field force previously to understand where clients' needs and wants were, but that really wasn't truly a full in-depth picture of that client perspective. So we did this through our early NPS work and then through journey mapping. You know, and as an organization, we really had not declared a view on the end-to-end stage, which meant that our individual business units were actually creating their own view of our journey stages, which, as you can imagine, often focused heavily on their specific area rather than the true end-to-end journey our consumers and clients experience with us. We started aligning around this truly through this process and making sure that we had leaders aligned to what's that true end-to-end stage journey. We scoped the journey map based on where we were driving the business and made an intentional decision to leave out areas which would have complicated the initial journey map. But we are focusing on those going forward. So our goal was to scope out the majority of the map initially and then to expand into additional areas and validate any new or different moments of truth or pain points. We used a very inclusive process. So we drew in leaders across the functional areas through initial interviews and internal workshops. This created greater unity and understanding across the organization. In addition to providing an internal view, the external validation was done through a quantitative NPS data and our qualitative in-depth interviews. So we were able to clearly put those two together. The value of the initial journey map and extended maps has been significant on multiple fronts. So first, at a high level, it's helped us better understand areas where we were fragmented, so both in our people, our processes, our technology, and our data. And it also helped us understand the impact that it had on our clients, which has resulted in organizational structure changes, helping us to align better to serve our clients. It also has been instrumental in helping us hone in on the most important priorities through our moments of truth and pain points. And having an outside-in view to our priorities has heightened attention and focus on the client-validated areas. Based on the interconnectedness of the field experience with the client experience for us, we decided to build out journey maps for our field force as well. So the field journey map is still in flight and will be important to bringing this together in full picture. So we'll have both that client journey map and our field force journey map, and we can definitely see connections in how we're going to be able to better serve our clients and our field by having this information together holistically. Jeff, could you tell us a little bit more and walk through that? How do we construct these?
Sure, happy to. This is an extremely complex business, so developing the current state maps for the client as well as the advisors has been really about a 22-month process so far. It's really important when doing mapping to understand that, first of all, a map is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. The intent is that you're trying to do two things with journey mapping. One is create a framework which you can leverage over time to manage your experiences with. So this is a tool that you are creating that you will be continuously using over the lifetime of your experience work. But the second is the process of developing the maps is intended to draw engagement across the organizations. Organizations tend to be exceptionally strong in functions or silos, often less effective working across the organization. And so moving through the development of a map is a cross-functional exercise and an engagement exercise across all of the groups. And scope matters. If you try, there are many businesses like Northwestern that are extremely complex. So you need to break the map down into logical components, either customer segments, product segments, geographical segments. But it's easier to build a map and then build upon that map and leverage that map to bring in other views and perspectives. So we started with the integrated client map. There was disability, long-term care, and annuities that were exceptionally complex businesses, so they became second, third, and fourth layers that we added into the map in subsequent steps. We then had clients that are served by a pool approach that were layered in next, and then we moved into wealth management clients in another layer. Similarly, we did an advisor map, so those that are managing the mass population of clients on your business and in your business. So how do you develop and grow advisors and career path them over time? And how do you support them with their actual interactions with their clients? And then we did a view for wealth management, because again, they were highly different. So the point is to say that think of mapping as developing a framework and an infrastructure that you are going to use and leverage over time. It is a tool just like many other management tools are. It's not simply a voice of customer exercise. It absolutely is a tool that you'll use over time. And think of the process as a way to engage and align and involve everyone. And if you're truly trying to shift your culture, take your time, do it right, and ensure that you get the value of the engagement as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeff. And that journey map has definitely been something that's ongoing for us. We're starting to work on how to best track those moments of truth and pain points to make sure that it is a living, ongoing exercise for us and that we're able to report out on these and make them useful as we elevate those experiences for our clients. So more work to continue in that. Next. So the next area that I want to talk about is the governance and the importance of that and kind of a little bit of the ebb and flow that we've been through as an organization. So I'm sure that you've gathered from what we've shared thus far that having that executive alignment and support has been critical for our success. We really were lucky in that we had a positive start, but we've had our fair share of those struggles and continue to evolve that process. We've been learning and adjusting on the way as we go. So as I mentioned earlier, we started off in 2014 with a small cross-functional group of executives. They were instrumental in serving as champions and getting that alignment and momentum across the organization through regular strategic dialogue. We made deliberate decisions a year and a half into our work to disband that group based on other communication channels being put in place. We also felt that we had laid a really strong foundation that this type of group was no longer needed. We've been learning, though, in that small, intimate, strategic dialogue and engagement was really definitely still needed. So the focus and frequency may look different, but there is still that need that we have, and we felt a gap that since we disbanded that group and not having their executive support and that team in place. So now we're exploring options to reignite a similar cross-functional group of executives going forward. Again, I mentioned it'll look a little bit different, but having that support ongoing is something that we know we definitely need. The second area for governance that I want to connect on is the priority focus areas. So the journey map priorities and our net promoter driver analysis were used to help us define our CX priorities and focus areas. As you might expect, we found much overlap and consistency with the journey mapping moments of truth and pain points, and what our NPS driver analysis said, which identified those interactions that having the greatest impact on advocacy, both consistency with the journey mapping moments of truth and the pain points that we identified. All right, I think we're good. Let's move on. So the next two areas of governance that I want to talk about is local targets and metrics and corporate project prioritization. So we're really in the early stages of working with our leaders to set local targets and metrics. We've had a lot of energy around CX across the organization, which is great, and our leaders want to understand how they can impact key client metrics. But we really want to make sure we have the right data, and so we've been collecting that to date, and we're now better equipped to provide that to them with the local targets and metrics. And we'll provide them with some clear line of sight, which ensures that they're going to understand where they can have the greatest impact based on our 6 priority areas and focus areas. It allows that accountability to reside closer to the business. So I mentioned earlier that we really made that decision that CX would not be owned by a CX department, but it would be owned by the business areas. And we are following through with that in our metrics and target areas. The other governance element we've started to tackle is with our corporate project prioritization process. So we've introduced the journey stages into the overall process, and we're asking leaders to identify where and how their projects or requests are impacting that client journey. And we're asking them to provide client data so that outside-in perspectives support their requests when they're asking for funding for their initiatives going forward. All right, next. So the next thing I want to start focusing on is really how are we making those mindset shifts? And I talked about the importance of bringing the operating principles and how we're going to deliver that intended experience down to the organization as a whole. And you heard me continue to refer the framework as a guide for our path forward, and through each of those stages, there's critical work focused on engaging the organization to create client-centric culture and embedding enhanced practices. So one of the first areas we focused on to begin engaging the organization was activating these 5 operating principles that we discussed were the second part of the statement of intent. So how are we going to deliver that distinctive client experience? And we felt this was an important early step as it provided a clear and structured way for the organization to understand what that distinctive experience was and how each employee could connect to it and help us deliver it. We did it through a series of sessions called Operating Principle Activation Workshops. Those activation workshops were really focused on helping employees understand the key concepts and processes needed to define and deliver that extended experience. We also provided an introduction to the operating principles at a deeper level and shared tools that they could use both at the workshop and then going forward. And then finally, we spent a lot of time during that workshop allowing them to actually practice how they would apply those operating principles to a touch point to reimagine and enhance the client experience that we intended. We began conducting those workshops with our client-facing areas first. So those are the areas that directly interact with our clients. And then we started focusing on the client-enabling areas, which are those areas that support those client-facing areas. So we've continued to receive a lot of strong positive feedback on the impact of these workshops from leaders and employees. But I'll just emphasize, as all of you know, when you're making change, doing change management, that a workshop is not going to solve it for you. So you need to make sure that there's really a systematic and a sustainable change approach built in when moving this forward. So it's just really a small part, but a very key part of moving this into the organization as a whole.
Now this is a really exciting part of the work that Northwestern has done. The reality is that companies are good at making statements about what customer experience is. It's incredibly difficult for most companies to actually figure out how to operationalize that and how people sitting in a role today, call center role, sales role, whatever, actually bring this to life. This is where you start to truly see the connection between sort of that mission, vision, values, and brand and the actual things that people are going to do at a point in time. So when we developed the journey maps with Northwestern Mutual, one of the things that we pulled together is functional ownership. So who is accountable to deliver at every touch point in that journey? And so what Laura's team was able to do was really help them understand what the experience is that Northwestern is trying to create, really clarify what these operated principles look like, but then actually connect the dots down to an existing interaction. So you're going to talk to customers at this point in time in the journey. This is the touch point you own. Let's talk about how you apply these principles to this individual interaction. And it's the first time that you actually see employees really formally being connected with the corporate strategy, but in a meaningful way and in a language that is specific to them. It's a really powerful point in time.
Yeah, we've received tons of feedback from our business partners regarding the immediate impact they could see in using the principles, and how employees at every level were able to actually take it and make immediate action in their decision and actions that they were taking that impacted the client. So next, okay. So the other part of the mindset shift is all around that change management. So how are we activating that through the organization? How are we making sure that we're making that cultural shift to be really a client-centric organization? And while what you're going to see in a few of the things that I'm going to run through on this particular slide are very much the tangible things that we did to help make that shift and continue to work on making that shift, one of the things I really want to point out is this really has and will continue to be a cultural shift for us. And so there's a ton of intangible work that's going on behind the scenes in order for us to make a unified approach across the organization. So thinking about assessing all of our HR processes, what are our reward systems and mechanisms, how are we communicating, and what are those things that we're saying that could possibly be damaging or reinforcing the old way of doing things. So it's a lot of that behind the scenes work that's going on that's taking much of the cultural shift time. And so I won't spend a lot of the time on that because I'm sure you all know that, but that is really where we've spent the majority of our upfront time from a change management perspective. But then we also started getting into some very tangible, real ways that our employees could start experiencing what that shift might look like and what that future is that we envision when we talk about being client-focused and having the clients at the center of our lives. So a couple of the things, I won't go through all the things on the slide here, but a couple of things that I wanted to point out to you that we've been working on are, one of the first things we worked on was what we call the CX Hub. It's an online resource site focused on providing leaders and employees with the information and resources they need to connect to all things CX. So including our clients, who they are, the journey that they're having with us, what they're saying their needs and wants are, how we're doing with meeting their expectations ongoing, so continuing to update when we have more voice of client insights, and then what's being focused on across the organization to enhance their experience and how they can help us. Next was the CX Summit. So as you can imagine, the CX Hub provided kind of a high level for everyone across the organization, but there were definitely leaders who needed a deeper understanding. So we provide CX Summits to those areas where we can provide deeper insights to our voice of client research and understand the projects that are being worked on across the organization, so we bring them all together. Other things we're doing is offering CX immersion sessions. So as we receive more insights, going to the organization as a whole and providing updates to employees on ongoing insights, tiers of focus, and what we're doing. It's really also telling it from a storytelling perspective so that employees can build that empathy and start feeling like they understand what our clients are going through and how they need our support to be financially secure. We'll do things like CX Week. So in October, we align to the National CX and Customer Service Weeks, where we create awareness and celebrate the great work that's happening across NM. We also are in the process of building a CX immersion center and campus immersion experiences. And so that's about helping the employees step into the shoes of our clients, both by really understanding the current state of how we're providing that client experience and then giving them very in-depth detail about that future state that we're intending to deliver. So it's the real good, the bad, and the ugly of our current experience with our clients. And so our employees being able to see that from that client perspective, not just our field perspective, and then being able to understand that intended experience. And then I think the last thing I'll point out is our growth path, which is really focused on providing short bits of snippets of information that leaders can use in small settings to help talk about client experience. It's about helping provide them with the tools and research and ways to start talking about it with employees that they're really not previously equipped with. So those are just a few examples. Last, I want to talk with Jeff. Jeff and I want to talk about some of the key learnings that we had.
And just a reminder before we go into key lessons learned, up in your slide you'll see a Q&A tab. We see some questions coming in. If there are any questions that you have, please put them in, and we'll do our best to try to answer them.
Okay, so we've made tremendous progress. We've learned a lot, and we're continuing to learn key lessons. But we wanted to share with you some of the biggest lessons we've learned along the way. So first, a strategy, a roadmap, and efforts like journey mapping are only as good as what you do with them. But the real value comes from being able to bring them forward in an actionable way that begins to impact decision-making and becomes also a routine part of that everyday activity and long-term planning. No one person, role, or team owns the customer experience. You've heard that consistently through our presentation today, that some areas may have a closer line of sight and impact the experience, but every business owner, every business unit really has that role in playing in the collective experience. It's not a separate stream of work. It really needs to be embedded if you want to be client-centric. Senior leadership support is a must-have. Although we have some work ahead of us, we would not have been able to achieve it at all gotten to this point over the past few years without that executive support. And then another area is really formalizing that CX to our HR and business practices, as I just mentioned, through that culture change work. That's a must-do. The overall ecosystem is important. So if you're not bringing in the right talent or developing and rewarding people for those CX values and behaviors, you will fall short in providing that intended experience. Anything else, Jeff, that you would add?
No, I mean, it's very well said. It really is, it is a leader-led process. We had a client once that told us that it began with them pushing the bus up the hill. Once they created the excitement and the engagement, they had a hard time even getting on the bus because the momentum was so strong. So this is like kind of that snowball effect. If you get the right wheels in motion, this will build and grow, and it'll be hard as an organization to keep up. So that's great. Thank you very much, Laura. That was really interesting information, and love to go through it. There's a couple of questions that we'll go through that are here. And again, up in the top, you'll see a tab. Please feel free to ask a few questions, and we'll do our best to get through them. First question is, was the CX core team formed before this assessment was done? And if so, what was the premise for the CX team to begin with? Laura?
Yes, so actually the assessment was conducted very early on. It was when that small group of executive leadership had come together and really just started talking about the experience we were providing and the experience we wanted to provide. And we really didn't have a sound understanding of where we were going at that point. So we had a very small team. In fact, if I recall correctly, I think it was one individual, possibly two at the time, that were helping doing some of that research and understanding and building that foundational. That was really a part of our CX team. So again, one or two individuals. Out of that assessment and that really understanding that we were ad hoc or missing in all of those 6 areas really helped elevate our ability to reinforce the need for a stronger and broader team.
Great, thank you very much. Another good question. What was the precise process for developing the roadmap and getting confirmation it was the right approach?
Great. So this was a great partnership that we had with CFN and with Jeff. They brought to us the framework because it was one of those areas that they had done research and we knew that it was a great model for us to play off of. Then what we did is we took a look at what we knew our current experience was and our organizational challenges, what we knew we needed to do in order to lay that foundation and then excel forward. So we took what their framework had as far as best practice areas for each of those 5 areas on the roadmap, and we shifted or adjusted them just slightly in order to align them to our organization. We then took that forward to some of our key leaders just to verify that this is what we were thinking was right. We kind of took it to some of the key leaders that we knew could give us some good insight. But overall, we had pretty quick alignment that the roadmap was the right thing because we had done our research. We had worked with BSN and the research that they had provided us to say these were some good foundational things to move us forward and to be very deliberate.
Oh, great. And there's another question connected to this, and I can continue the discussion on this. The other question is, how did you work with leadership to gain alignment and determine ownership for the priority areas you've identified? Essentially, as Laura described, we have a foundational approach to customer experience. There are things that organizations that do this well, sort of best practice, will put in place in order to be able to begin to build out the foundation. And so there are just clear tactical things that can be done to begin to evolve the culture. One of those tactical things that adds great value that we've talked about today is the journey mapping. And the reason for that is it helps answer the second question about gaining leadership alignment and ownership and priorities. Essentially, the mapping exercise is intended to help you understand the current state and help you understand the customer impressions. Where is it that you are driving the strongest emotional equity in the relationship, and where might you be losing the most value in that relationship? Because Northwestern had done such a strong job in developing, clearly understanding that end-to-end current state and putting both qualitative and quantitative measures against the map itself, the priority areas clearly identified themselves throughout that map. The second step that was taken, and it kind of answers another question that comes in here, basically saying it looks like a lot of work to get to this place. Most organizations won't spend the time to do this as they can't show ROI right away. How is it benefiting? This is the point of measurement and connecting that sort of line of sight to business outcomes. So in this case, there were many things where Northwestern was able to say, we're not acquiring a customer because this touch point, this interaction, this set of interactions is failing. We're not able to upsell, cross-sell to clients in this case. We're losing clients at these points in time. So because they had such a strong articulation of the map, because they knew specific areas in the map that were underperforming and impacting the experience, they could draw a line of sight over to what the financial implications were to the company. And there is almost always going to be a series of opportunities that comes out of your mapping work and your voice of customer work as you connect it into and your analytics work into your map. And you'll get those that are sort of lower hanging fruit, earlier wins, that are clear things that you need to do and can see the outcomes of. And that success typically builds the momentum and the interest in driving to more complex, more difficult issues going forward.
The other thing I would add to that from a cultural perspective that the map and the Voice of Client Insights provided us was culturally, it really allowed us to focus on that end-to-end and both that upstream and downstream. So as an organization that really, and many financial organizations focus on that, have kind of that product structure, everything's structured around the product. This allowed us to change and really focus on that client's perspective from that end-to-end. It helped us culturally break out of those silos that we were operating from in the past and really started making that mindset shift for us. So it was a critical benefit for us from that perspective as well.
Oh, great. Another question. Laura, how did you get agreement and buy-in of the CX operating principles?
So the operating principles were developed heavily based on the research that we did, both the ethnographic and the early NPS research. It formulated most of that original design, and it really told us what was important to our clients. So we built that first model based on that insight and then demographics, or the insight and the ethnographic research. But then we formed a small cross-functional team to turn that into words that would resonate with our employees, so making it culturally fit. So we needed to make it from, take it from that research and what our clients were saying they really wanted and needed, and then turn it into something that was actionable versus conceptual. So that was probably where the sweet spot was in order to get that buy-in. So once we had that, people could see that it was actionable, then it was pretty easy to get that buy-in and move forward.
And the other piece of it is, remember, it's driven from mission, vision, values, and brand. So if you are confident in who you are as a company, it's more challenging to debate whether or not these are the appropriate items or not. We've got time for one more question. I can start to take this one on. The question is, are you actually using the map now that you've created? And the answer is absolutely yes. The team is in there almost daily. They're either updating descriptions, or they're adding or taking away or changing touch points within their map, because the organization is in continuous evolution mode. And so they are changing the experience. So when you add a touch point, when you change a touch point, when you execute a touch point differently, or as Laura described, because they recognize the complexity of how the organization was facing off with the client, they've made organizational design changes. That means they've had to go in and change functional ownership and accountability. So the answer to the question is absolutely yes, it's used virtually daily. It's also used because it's placed on the table in the strategic conversations, and if they're going to make a shift in how the organization is going to behave, they literally have the map there and can say, well, what does this mean to the client? Where in the experience is this going to impact that client? And that's when this works, when it's a framework, when it's used and consistently driven through the business on an ongoing basis. So just on the next page, hope this has been a helpful conversation for you. My email is here on screen. Happy to have a 30-minute one-on-one conversation with anybody that wishes to have that. If there's any more clarity you'd like to bring to this, happy to have that conversation with you. As well, CFN has a best practice assessment. And as Laura said, that really is a way to begin to better understand how your organization is prepared to really embark on customer experience. So what are those key best practices that organizations are engaging in order to really drive that experience forward? So feel free to connect with me for that 30-minute discussion, or feel free to connect if you wish to have a conversation around the best practice assessment. We're happy to help you better understand where you are as an organization today and where you fit in alongside other organizations and best practices as it relates to your capabilities as an organization. And thanks for joining, and Laura, especially thank you to you. It's been really great to have your perspective and the real world brought into the conversation. Exceptionally helpful. As you can see, we have other recordings from our previous sessions that we hope that you'll take a look at. We will be doing another webinar. This is an old slide, but we'll be doing one in August. You will be getting in a notice on that. Please connect with Anne. Her email's at the bottom, or myself, if there's anything at all that you need. Thanks very much for participating. I hope that Laura's information has been helpful to you, and we really look forward to connecting with lots of you in the future. Thanks very much. Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.